colleagues. Welcome all those who are here in person and the multitude who are online. I think we are already a few seconds late, so we will not waste any time. I will call upon the Executive Dean of the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs to give us some welcome remarks. And then from there, the program will start. I'll be your program director for today. My name is Teboho Libakeng. I'm Professor of Security and Intelligence Studies at what we fondly refer to as TM School. So with that, Prof. Edith Paswani, could you come, please?
Program Director, Professor Lebakeng, the Executive Committee of the Thabo Mbeki School, colleagues, friends, and our friends online as well, and our postdoctoral fellows present here, students of UNISA. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Are you cold? Yes, let me take this opportunity to welcome all of you in attendance this morning, and both you who took the effort to be here, and those who are online as well around the world. And many of you should be very much aware by now, if you have been to some of our seminars and colloquiums here at the TM School, you should be aware that the school is known as one of those schools that always do this cutting edge debate through seminars, conferences, and colloquia. You can visit our website and see our YouTube, all the talks, all the seminars that we have hosted, and we go where no one else go in terms of discourse and also in terms of current issues as well. And we also pride ourselves in providing space and opportunities for vibrant engagements. And you see, when I saw the list of people who registered, I was also surprised because intelligence seems to be a taboo subject in most African countries. It's a spook area, right? People think of intelligence as spook area, and it seems to be an area where many people are scared, uncomfortable about it. And many of us as people, we are scared or we fear to hear the word intelligence. And even the people who are working in intelligence, Prof. Lebakeng, we are skeptical about them. So, but I must say, it also took us quite a lot here at the school to understand this subject and why is it being taught. Are we not compromising the country? You know, you ask yourself so many things. Now you're going to teach people how to discover secrets. It took us along as well here as a school to understand what this subject is all about. But I must confess that since it's one of our academic offering at the TM School, and we have been offering it for the past 5 years, and now many of us are beginning to understand the importance of human security, as it were. And some of us are beginning to grow towards appreciating the importance of statecraft and other spheres. So I think it's becoming much more clearer what is it all about. But it's still, we must also acknowledge that it's still an emerging field in Africa, and it is very dynamic. Many people will have to get to grasp that why it is being taught, or why is it one of the academic offerings. We have taught it here at the TM School as a short learning program. And now that we have been accredited, masters and doctoral students, we are going to take masters and doctoral students now, 2026. Yes, yes. We will soon announce publicly, and we will soon actually also send out the communique for applications for 2026. And so security and intelligence studies will also be covering some of those. And it's a very important one because it really intersects with so many of our focus areas of study. And I am looking forward to young people wanting to understand statecraft, to understand intelligence, to understand security. It's very important. It's very important that we need to engage and learn these and have interest and widen your interest in terms of also securing your own country, right? Part of patriotism is to also to make sure that your own people are secure in the first place, right? How do we make sure that people are secure, and how do we protect our country from attacks and all other things? What are the small things at the community level that people can learn to make sure that if there's going to be instability in our little communities, what are the things that you can pick up if you have done this subject as well? What are these few things that you can be able to lead? You will also realize that even in our communities, many of you in this room might be younger, but I see some people who could be my age or older as well. But those ones, they know the Peace Corps and all of this when the country was unstable. It's possible to teach people at the ground, in the community level, to be peacekeepers and be able to signal if the problems are going to be, things are going to happen in their communities. So you also need that, I'm sure I'm right, Prof, you need that kind of intelligence as well at the community level. Who are the people who are making our community unstable? Who are the people who are doing this? You need to have that kind of skill, and this is what we teach here. We are not about espionage, we are not about spooks, we are about actually security, human security. And let me take this opportunity to thank all our speakers that are online and who are going to join us. And special thanks to Dr. Sepo Gwaitiwa. Sepo Gwaitiwa is in Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia, and he's also going to speak in this. Thank you, Dr. Sepo, for joining us. Professor and Provost Ngwabai Daniel Nte is the professor and provost of the Novena University in Nigeria. He's also going to be with us here, and we thank you for coming to the TM School. Dr. Lincoln Cave is from the Senior Associate at the Ethics Institute in South Africa, and he is going to present here, and as well as Dr. Keba Petsui Lotshwayo, Senior Lecturer from Botswana. So last week, we were on national dialogue, right? Now we are entering a continental dialogue with our interlocutors here, Botswana, Nigeria, Australia. It's a global, actually, it's a global dialogue because we have people on the continent also outside of this continent who will be joining us in this discussion, and to make intelligence familiar to us, familiar, no longer a taboo. Let's make it fashionable and casual to understand that everyone can study intelligence. You don't have to be some spook. You can actually learn it and learn the craft of it. Let me conclude by welcoming all of you to the seminar and wishing you all the best during the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Paswane. Colleagues, today's gathering is meant really to stimulate debate. So I'm not going to waste any time with salutations. Allow me to stand on established protocols and start by saying, when I looked at those who registered, I realized that there were researchers, there were practitioners, there were scholars, and other stakeholders, of intelligence. And I was thrilled by this because of one reason. For those who don't know some of the revolutions happening in intelligence, we are now moving to a situation where academia and practitioners are merging. And that is meant to popularize, intelligence, to make sure that people do not see this field as a taboo field. I hope, Prof. Paswani, that will make you feel better because there are efforts towards that. And I think those who are in audience, the mix itself indicate that. There have been a number of, articles written. One of the classic one is by Everest Chalati. It's on his blog. The title, if I recall, is The Future of Intelligence Studies in Africa. And it looks at the challenges and opportunities in bridging academia and intelligence. So there are really good efforts that are being made. The reason for that is because intelligence practitioners have very little time for reflection. And intelligence studies provide reflection in terms of the practice of intelligence. So we hope that today we should be able to really discuss the practice, how intelligence is practiced, how intelligence is studied, and of course, how intelligence is theorized. That's even more important, how it is theorized. This is important because, as Prof. Paswani alluded to, intelligence in Africa is the most understudied area. And there are a number of reasons for that. But the result of that is that we have very few conferences held on intelligence. We don't even have journals actually on, intelligence. We have very few centers in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Ghana, but most of the countries, intelligence is just subsumed under either international relations or under, security studies. So it becomes very important that we discuss this issue as to whether in Africa, is it necessarily to subsume intelligence under security studies? Because intelligence provides a wide range of solutions to many of the problems that Africa is facing. It's not just an instrument that is used by a statecraft. There have been efforts, colleagues, to deal with issues of, intelligence, and some of the people who are involved in this, and I hope you'll be able to, access some of the dynamics that are taking place. The African Intelligence Studies Collective, they actually deal with intelligence a lot. And of course, the purpose is to cultivate what is called, academization of, intelligence, to promote intelligence studies literature on the continent. And that is meant to come up with the kind of literature that is relevant for the continent. Because if you look at the intelligence studies landscape, you'll realize that most of the literature that we use, like of course many other fields, comes from the UK, from the US, from Canada. And that is what theorizing intelligence in intelligence studies is really all about. Let me thank some very critical people in Australia, Morena, and very important for one reason. Uh, they allowed us to use a journal. And you'll see that the journal is placed in front of you there. A Journal of Policing, Intelligence, and Counterterrorism. To write a special edition on frontiers in African intelligence studies. So to be provided that space was very important, because even if you check, even UNISA, despite hosting a number of Taylor and Francis, journals, we still don't have one dedicated to intelligence and security, on the continent. The list that we have is African, a security review, but nothing on intelligence, which shows the problems that we are facing. When we made a call for submissions, we wanted to get a continental representation, of the submissions. Unfortunately, we ended up with what I would like to call a Nigerian and a South African problem, where most of the submissions were from Nigeria and from South Africa. And we had hoped that we will get, more than that. Colleagues, let me, as I'm about to let our speakers, who will be four, as Prof. Paswani has indicated, we are supposed to be five. But I was instructed to withdraw my paper, which was titled Repurposing Intelligence Studies Through Policy Science Gaze. That has been withdrawn precisely because we wanted to give the four presenters enough time so that we have 1 hour of robust discussion. So what we will do in terms of procedure, with your permission, we'll allow each speaker to finish the presentation, and then you will just put your notes, questions, comments on the side, and once they are done, we will open up for a robust debate that we will have. With that, I allow Dr. Tsepo Kwatiwa to start. Open for him, please. Dr. Kwatua is
Yes,
in
we can hear you.
Australia, by the way. He has written seminal works. He's there. I'll let him, he will introduce himself and then he can take us through. Doc, you have approximately 20 minutes. If you can't say it in 20 minutes, then you are in trouble. Thank you.
I think they too much light, just a second. Right. Greetings to all of you, and I'd like to first and foremost thank Professor Lebaking. Actually, let me start with thanking the Dean, Professor Pashwana. Also thank Professor Lebaking and Professor Julian Drugen, who is not only my boss, but also the managing editor of the journal, is the editor-in-chief. And also thank the contributors for this opportunity to say a few things about African intelligence studies, and also acknowledge the path that has been set by various authors, particularly the likes of Ryan Schaefer, who edited a couple of books that made a serious impact on African intelligence studies. So let me introduce myself. My name is Tsepo Gwadiwa. I'm currently researching and lecturing on intelligence studies at Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia. And it has been really a great opportunity to interact with scholars in this field, both in Africa and elsewhere. And today I would like to cover a few things, primarily focusing on three themes: the current issues and changes in African intelligence, as well as looking at the trajectory of intelligence studies and the value of intelligence education. As the professor mentioned, for a long time, intelligence studies has been less popular, largely because of misconceptions, sometimes exaggerations, and at times due to the way intelligence has been not only been perceived, but also practiced in Africa. But that being said, let us not lose sight of the fact that intelligence is one of the key pillars of national security as well as international security. Decision makers rely on intelligence to anticipate, detect, and respond to threats and risks, as well as respond to opportunities that arise in relation to the safety as well as the strategic interests of various countries in Africa, as well as the continent. And of course, intelligence helps us define and shape these national security strategies, continental security strategies, to ensure that we direct resources the right way, and we also optimize those resources, because as you are aware, in this continent, we have serious challenges on a number of in a number of areas, include whether it be conflict issues or issues generally relating to politics, peace, and security. But as the professor mentioned, Africa is actually going through various transitions. And of course, we do not want to be left behind in this conversation about intelligence studies. And if you look at the history of intelligence studies, the discourse particularly started with political science, and here and there you'd get mentions of intelligence. Later on, the focus on international relations, particularly with regard to the study of whom you get a couple of theories that were put forward that relate to intelligence, such as the theory of surprise, for example, which is largely centered on the role of intelligence in conflict. And then you move to the growth of security studies, where there were ample discussions about the role of intelligence. But as Professor mentioned earlier on, the unfortunate part was that for the most part, the discussion largely centered on military intelligence. And for those of us who are in Africa, even those a little bit older than me, when we heard of the word intelligence, we primarily think of organizations that largely breach human rights, organizations that largely terrorize or rather instigate what in some quarters, particularly in South Africa and other countries in the global south, came to be known as state terrorism. And in some instances, of course, there might be people in this room who have been subjected to heinous acts perpetrated by some of these institutions. Some of you may be from countries such as Kenya, and you're a little bit advanced in the years. You might remember the special branch. If you are from Bangladesh or India, you might also remember this, the special branch. And of course, across various countries in sub-Saharan Africa, where intelligence was known for the wrong things. But that does not take away the value of intelligence in our society. And for the most part, we missed out on the true value of intelligence because of those who misapplied it, whether they used it for regime preservation or they used it for other ends. This does not mean that during those challenging years, Africa did not aptly apply intelligence to advance the continent or move it forward. So when these things were taking place, other parts of the world were advancing. That is why today you find that there are so many programs in the West, as well as other countries such as China, as well as Russia, where intelligence studies took root and shape in the early years after the Second World War. And then you move forward to a major transition in Africa, particularly with the end of the Cold War. There were conversations around democracy, which is still an important part of governance in societies. And we begin to see a conversation around intelligence reform. And to a certain extent, Africa made certain steps in the right direction to try to reform some of these institutions. This usually came as a part of a package of security sector reform, sponsored from outside, or sometimes, such as in other cases, such as South Africa, where there was plenty of local agency in trying to reform intelligence services, repurposing them for something that is much more relevant for the type of countries or continent that we're trying to build at that time. Then you get into another major transition, particularly from around the year 2000. Then we begin to see the growth of what we call human security as both a concept and a practice. And there was a lot of buy-in into the notion of human security. And from there, we begin to appreciate, as Africa begins to take the center stage in dealing with its own challenges within the continent, you begin to see a couple of things take place. Regional economic communities, as well as regional mechanisms, they begin to be more responsible in terms of ensuring political stability, as well as peace and security. The African Union also begins to show more actorness, what political scientists will call actorness. And then the United Nations, of course, begins to work with these organizations to try to have a much more central role in dealing with some of these challenges. But around the same time, within these last 25 years, you begin to see intelligence being appreciated even in circles where it was considered a taboo. It's quite unfortunate that even up to today, there are certain areas where if you mention the word intelligence, people will tell you, if you mention the I word, especially among diplomatic circles, they'll say if you mention the I word, you make people uncomfortable. But I would like to believe that if you talk to practitioners over the last 25 years, there's been an appreciation of the value of intelligence. As a matter of fact, along the same period, Africa instituted one of the most important continental intelligence bodies known as the Committee on Intelligence and Security Services in Africa. And that showed the value of intelligence, or rather the value that countries place on intelligence. And intelligence has become much more useful because you can deal with traditional security threats using intelligence, or as well as deal with non-traditional security threats using intelligence. Let me say something that is perhaps a little less popular and not fully covered in this special issue. One of the things that have been troubling, I believe that some of you might have observed this, is that we begin to see a rise in intelligence capabilities of non-state actors, particularly violent non-state actors. That is why if you go to Somalia, you find that Al-Shabaab has got a very robust intelligence service. I believe it's called the AMNIAT, if I'm not getting the term right, which is quite capable with strong counterintelligence capabilities, with strong human intelligence capabilities. And you also begin to see the use of the use of what they call non-violent non-state actors. NGOs use intelligence. Some state institutions that don't fall within the conventional rubric of what you'd call an intelligence community begin to use intelligence, but they don't call it as such. Because as Professor mentioned earlier in this session, it is very important to appreciate what intelligence is, what it is used for, and what it means, and also differentiate it to other aspects of intelligence, some of which are still being contested in intelligence studies, whether they are standard intelligence, such as covert action or even counterintelligence. But these are being used or applied. NGOs use these, especially international NGOs, as well as other international organizations, even though they don't call that intelligence. Corporate entities also have intelligence units to guide their work in Africa. For example, you have what I don't know what they call it now, but what was called the Bill Gates Foundation. They actually had an intelligence unit within their organization to guide them. Investors who dare to go into some of the most unstable parts of Africa actually have intelligence units within their structures, even though they don't name them intelligence units. And of course, if you're in South Africa, if you are in East Africa, as well as West Africa, you might appreciate the proliferation of private intelligence firms. And this has also become popular in the West. You also have Western companies setting shop in South Africa and other parts of the continent. So that shows us the extent to which intelligence has grown both as a field as well as a practice. And it's very imperative for us to catch up with these trends, especially given what's already happening outside, so that we get to train more people to understand, as Professor Pashwana mentioned, so that more people can understand what intelligence means. Every now and then when I converse with my students, I remind them that not all of the graduates are going to end up joining intelligence services. Some of them will go into politics, but the benefit will be that in the future, we will have policymakers who understand what intelligence is. Because if you look at world history, especially in most developed countries, there have been instances where leaders don't understand what intelligence is, and they either end up abusing it or they underappreciate its value. You can actually look back into history, be it Australia, be it the United States or other parts of the world. But if you have more people graduating from these programs, of course, they will understand what it is. And they'll also begin to appreciate the need to reform some of these institutions. For example, some of military intelligence entities that actually need to be augmented and be repurposed into defense intelligence, which is a little bit broader, but that's a topic for another day. And then let me come to something that is more contemporary and more pressing. Where are we as Africa? We have certain challenges that actually invite us, if not incite us, to look at the value of intelligence. We still have serious challenges relating to external influence in the country. Just among many, I'll pick 3 examples. We still have certain countries which we would like to refer to as powers, from the west to the east, through the Gulf and the Middle East, who have installed intelligence infrastructure and capital throughout the continent to maximize their gains, but to the detriment of African countries and African people. We also have instances where our so-called international partners, on the one hand, they speak of supporting African objectives, but I believe we are not under any illusion that there is anybody from outside who is going to actually build Africa if Africans don't build Africa. So we have instances where partners secretly fund and sponsor violent non-state actors, as well as belligerents in certain conflicts. I think we have seen a lot of these, especially in the last 10 years. We still have mercenaries operating under the guise of private security companies. Where does that leave us today? It invites us to look at the need to invest into various disciplines or various collection disciplines. Africa is rich in human intelligence collection. And I'd like to believe that most of us, we are not under the illusion that intelligence came to Africa through the colonial institutions. Some of you sitting here today, when you're training in our intelligence academies across the world, you have assigned certain readings such as that of Frank Kitson. I think it's a publication from 1971, if I'm not getting it wrong. Alistair Horn, especially those of you from the Francophone, and David Galula. But what is more important is that we repurpose these capabilities that are existing and also invest in other collection disciplines, particularly in technical intelligence, so that we maximize our collection capabilities and also invest into our intelligence analysis capabilities, because this is still a big gap in the continent. Some of you might appreciate this particular issue that I'm talking about. Given some of the challenges that I mentioned a few seconds ago, it is important for African states and institutions to invest in robust counterintelligence to deal with traditional and non-traditional security threats in the continent. But let me speak about something that is also relevant to the young people in the room. We have a situation where Africa is still lagging behind in certain areas. We are always a few steps behind. But one of the areas that may be, as we open dialogue on the role of intelligence in Africa, as well as intelligence studies, African intelligence studies, we can also talk about the value of economic intelligence. Because right now, we are living in the age of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and we need to look at the value of economic intelligence in our various states so that we maximize on some of these gains so that Africa can move forward and achieve certain goals that are stipulated in Agenda 2063. Another important issue along these lines is to also tie our foreign policies to intelligence. Because in most countries, I can only think of five, if not 4 countries where I've seen a clear link between intelligence and foreign policy. But in many African countries, intelligence either serves to put populations under surveillance, including the diplomats who are working abroad, and sometimes when countries have to respond to certain changes within the region or beyond. But there has to be an institutional reform in many countries where intelligence is repurposed to support foreign policy goals, not just of those nations, but also those of our collective diplomacy as a continent. I think I've already hinted on the point of the link between intelligence and human security. Professor, now let me talk about intelligence studies, which is the last point. Other continents or regions have gone ahead, as Professor Lebake mentioned, and intelligence studies has been around in those countries for a while. You can talk about Australia, you can talk about the United States, talk about the United Kingdom, Canada, China, as well as Russia. But there are certain institutions that are also offering these subjects in different countries. And it's unfortunate that in certain other countries in Africa, some of these programs are still limited to government workers. Of course, we understand Africa, or rather African states, are some of the youngest in the world. If you compare them to Latin American states, including in comparison to Australia, Australia has been around for more than a century. But we need to do more because there's a long history of intelligence in our societies. As I mentioned earlier, intelligence as a concept and practice did not start during the colonial era in Africa. Some of you can actually attest to that if you look at the history, the martial history of your societies, whether you're speaking of the Zulus, if you speak of the Makongo between present-day Angola and what you call the DRC and other parts of the continent. It is important for us to study these things and actually appreciate this so that we plug ourselves into the international conversations about intelligence studies. And as we engage in this, let me finish with this. As we engage in this conversation, we are able to demystify certain aspects of intelligence, including those other areas that are still contested, whether they belong in standard intelligence, such as covert action or counterintelligence, and we'll be able to make an important contribution without taking away the value and the key currency of intelligence, which is secrecy. But to add value by popularizing and broadening intelligence concepts, and also equip larger fractions of society to appreciate what intelligence is and apply that in different parts or different aspects of governance, so that we will have more people, whether they are from the legal fraternity, people from law, people from sociology, different aspects, including those in the applied sciences. Here, I'm also speaking to engineers, I'm also speaking to doctors, because now this conversation has gone far ahead that now we also talk about health intelligence so that we anticipate, certain diseases or pandemics so that countries can be ready and we don't find ourselves where we were during COVID-19. So as Africa, we can actually be part of that conversation. It is also important to realize that we are not saying intelligence academies are not important. Intelligence academies at military training institutions, at police training institutions are still important. But intelligence studies has an interdisciplinary texture that does not exist, does not necessarily and always exist in these academies, because those who are trained in academies are trained for a specific purpose. But we bring an interdisciplinary texture that will enrich intelligence policy both at a national and international level. With this particular field, we also are able to equip our graduates with the critical thinking skills as well as the analytic skills that are needed with future practitioners so that we move away from the traditional practices that have led to intelligence politicization, traditional practices that have also led to intelligence being used for regime preservation and the violation of human rights, so that we appreciate the value of intelligence within a democratic context or within a reformed governance system, so that we are able to be in lockstep with the rest of the world in aptly using intelligence. And I'd like to reiterate this. It will not compromise the quality of intelligence, but rather add value. If you look at some of, for example, some of the courses or modules that we offer here at Macquarie, they actually produce some of the best graduates. I have a couple of graduates whom I'm still in touch with, working for private intelligence companies. Some of them took offers abroad. Some joined the naval intelligence in their countries, in countries that I cannot mention. But what I'm simply saying is that if we engage in this conversation and we also continue conferencing within Africa, we'll get to a point where we actually also improve our intelligence workforce in the continent. Because these academic programs will produce well-equipped, there's a lot of technology that is being used in these intelligence studies programs for simulation, for modeling, and all sorts of things. And as we provide these refresher courses for people already in either in collection tradecraft or analytic tradecraft, we will be able to make a significant input. And lastly, I would like to say this application is that we are launching today is actually a conversation starter. And we believe that we'll be able to contribute more and more to this field, and actually even include those of you who have felt left out in the past when we were working towards this spatial issue. And with that, I would like to say thank you and hand over back to Professor Lepekeng.
Wow. Thank you, Tsepo. Colleagues, a number of takeaways. I'm sure all of you have your takeaways, but we are not going to discuss. Tsepo, do you have the publication with you just to show to the colleagues? Oh, it's gone.
The special issue, the
special issue, just to show them the. Do you have a copy with you?
Okay. The special issue, I have this one, the version.
Oh,
so
your third volume. All right, it's okay. Colleagues, a number of takeaways. Thank you very much, Tsepo. You agree that if we allowed him 3 more hours, he would not have stopped. But the good thing that would have happened if we did, we would have all been converted to abandon our disciplines and want to take intelligence studies. I think some of the takeaways which are very important is that any prudent statecraft to advance and defend national interests depends on intelligence. I think that's a major takeaway. The second takeaway is that there are a number of critical revolutions taking place in intelligence. Whoever thought that different African countries can come together and form one intelligence organization? It happens because of a revolution that has taken place from what in intelligence they call need to know to need to share. And I hope I can see there are some people here that I'm going to pull together to begin to engage that at a later stage. We now move to Prof. Nde, a colleague in Nigeria. I prayed last night that he's okay, because when I spoke to him around 11 o'clock, he had such terrible flu. I advised that he must drink lemon and other concoctions because he cannot let us down. So I hope he is okay. Prof. Nde will do a short introduction of himself and continue to a very serious aspect of the discussion, especially in terms of location of, intelligence studies. Is it really proper to locate it under national security studies, or as Africans, given our challenges, we need to rethink that. Prof. Nde, you are welcome.
We can hear you.
Hello. Okay, you can hear.
We can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. Greetings from Nigeria, and most importantly, I want to thank Professor Josiah for being a very good brother, an African brother. And like he said, I've been having some kind of flu. I've been battling with it for some days now. I'll try as much as possible to be as audible as I can possibly be this morning. I want to thank the University of South Africa and the department for putting up this auspicious program, for us to brainstorm as African scholars and practitioners in a relatively new discipline, intelligence and security studies. And I have listened to the last speaker, and I share a lot of sentiments with what he said. And mine is to stir up some kind of controversy, which of course I know will lead to a lot of debate thereafter. Because this controversy I'm trying to stir up right now stems essentially from my experience of teaching this course in the last 20 years. I happen to be one of the very few people that crafted the curriculum for the Bachelor of Science degree in Intelligence and Security Studies on the continent. And ever since, we've been trying to look at what intelligence is all about by way of intelligence education. We're aware that the realities of the 21st century is bestowed upon us. The concept of collective security, and of course, the need to liberalize intelligence, knowledge, and education, as it were, so that it is not like in those days when some academies or some security agencies monopolize the entire process, and they find it to the extent that they became omnipotent, and it led to serious abuses. At least we now can talk about intelligence, online, talk about it in our classrooms, teach our students who are non-agents, who will also work in other endeavors. And like our last speaker said, some of them eventually become politicians and policymakers. And by that, it means that we have, a group of experts that we will be producing that will understand firsthand when the practitioners are talking, because they have at least some reasonable level of insight into the nature and dynamics of intelligence principles. Having said that, I have been looking at the domiciliarization of intelligence studies, and I discovered two great things in the course of this interesting area. We looked at Europe and discovered that most of their intelligence studies programs were located, originally in the Department of History, and to some extent, History and International Relations. And that made a lot of sense to me because these were regions that were colonial powers, those that wrote their own history and wrote African history on our behalf. So at the end of the day, for them to actually consolidate their colonial and neo-colonial grip on Africa, there is need for them to domicile intelligence studies in these areas. And it makes quite a lot of sense to me. For the United States, the bulk of intelligence studies department is located in the Department of Politics, Political Science, and political science related programs. And it also made a lot of sense to me in the course of thinking through all of this. And the point is that at the end of the Second World War, America emerged as a superpower, having saved a lot with minimal involvement in the war that destroyed the whole of Europe. And America used that opportunity to consolidate power all over the world, including Africa. So for them, it's going to make a lot of academic sense to situate intelligence studies in the Department of Politics and to some extent, international relations, as it were. Now, Africa is a politically young continent in terms of what the US call democratic institutions, because they are the ones who decided which country should be called this, why and how. The maps were drawn by them. And of course, the anthropology and the sociology of Africa during the colonial regime were written, and the foundations laid in written form by the colonizers. And so we grew up adopting what is common in the West and in the United States. And that's why you found out that the bulk of the few departments of intelligence studies, even in Africa, are either situated in the Department of History or the Department of Politics, as it were. Now, without prejudice to where intelligence studies is actually located, I have a strong feeling that we should make conscious effort towards the decolonization of intelligence studies in Africa. And that may also involve going ahead to look at exactly where this subject matter should be located. And from my teaching career and experience, I have searched through all the departments in the human sciences, the liberal arts area, not ignoring the aspect of technical intelligence that has to do with the physical science. We're all aware of that. But since what is popular in the world right now is the location of the Department of Intelligence Studies in either the Faculty of History and International Relations or Politics and International Relations, we should be objective enough to actually ask if we fall into these two categories. What was the African history like? What is the African history now? What is the political power of Africa before and now? We have a globally challenging history or we are yet to create our own history to challenge that which was created and documented for us? Do we have that power and hunger for power and domination to colonize the other countries of the world? The answers to all of these two questions resounding no's. I discover and I know, just like all of you also know, that as a continent, we are weak politically, economically, and even historically, because the bulk of our histories have been distorted. So in the midst of this dilemma, I came out with a hypothesis, which I said at the very beginning will stimulate a lot of arguments. And I looked at the strongest systems in Africa. These are African institutions that is the only area that has been managing, to struggle even in the midst of globalism and Western imperialist talk so far. These social institutions are managing to survive. And for us to really understand the nature and dynamics of intelligence studies, not the way they were imported to us in Western literature, Western lectures, Western seminars, we have to situate this fledgling discipline in those disciplines that study African social institutions. And what are these disciplines? I discovered principally that sociology and social anthropology will be the best area to domicile intelligence studies in Africa. This is because it's going to give us, the academia, the lecturers and students, as it were, including the practitioners, an indigenous understanding by the time we apply our required objectivity of the true nature of intelligence and security studies. Because more often, the practitioners in the house will agree with me, but when they're flown abroad and are taught intelligence studies, espionage, counterintelligence, all of that, statecraft, they need to come back home to do all the necessary adjustments to align what they have studied abroad, to the realities of Africa. Let us not forget that since the primary objective of intelligence practice is to guarantee national security in all its ramifications, we need to put to us as scholars and practitioners, whether the continent or the different countries in Africa have actually attained what we can say of a truth is the real status of nationhood. I say all of this because there have been occasion with even the nomination by the different intelligence agencies in the different countries in Africa for foreign training, even for local training, based on primordial sentiments, religion, ethnicity, maybe race, and all other forms of social identities. These things are anti-nationalist practice. They are realities on the continents of Africa, and we have to re-examine them. How about intelligence communication? We have credible intelligence, from the practitioners I have trained, that even when actionable intelligence is gathered, then they are transmitted accordingly. But because of primordial sentiments I'm not going to mention countries. And let's say that my country is not excluded from what I'm saying right now. There are cases where actionable intelligence is gathered and transmitted, but distorted along the line at the level of dissemination because the receiver of intelligence is biased already. And, the incidence of, cognitive dissonance comes in immediately. And these are colored by, what we carry in our head by way of social, identities and prejudices. And I know that the intricacies of all of these subject matters that I'm talking about cannot be effectively captured in history and political science. I say this not to project any particular discipline above the other one. I'm also saying it not to convert anybody from living his or her discipline. I'm just stirring up a conversation so that at the end of the day, looking at the very nature of Africa and the realities of this continent, and the fact that we are just managing to evolve into nationhood, we should critically do things that we can really appreciate and understand based on our daily perception. Because if we limit intelligence studies, let's say within the ambit of politics, for instance, which some universities talk about, power dynamics, statecraft, within policymakers and all of that, you will discover that a lot of issues may not be touched. But by the time you locate these things properly and look at the political, social anthropology and the sociology of the dynamics of intelligence studies in a nutshell, we can comprehensively, teach our students, in concepts that they can fully understand. Let us not forget, like the last speaker said, some of these graduates we're talking will not become regular intelligence practitioners. Some of them, like we said initially, will become politicians. Some of them will become cabinet ministers. Some of them will become, business executives, so that they can really appreciate the continental realities based on the social institutions that we are very, very conversant with. I am not, magnifying, the prejudices, as it were, but at our level of objectivity as academics, we should be able to call a spade, and we should be able to say that for this intelligence operation, these are the factors. A lot of intelligence failure that is prevalent on the continent of Africa and rooted on primordial prejudices. I'm saying this with every fiber in me because I have been interacting, with a lot of practitioners. I've been delivering lectures, to a lot of them, and most of them have come back to confess to me, and they told me, Prof, what you are saying is the truth. So if this is the reality, there is no need shying away from these realities. We have to confront them. We have to talk to us as Africans in the African way. And how do we talk to Africans? We must talk to Africans through our surviving social institutions. And how do we talk through our surviving social institutions? We can talk to these surviving social institutions through the disciplines of sociology and social anthropology. This is not to undermine, like I said from the very beginning, that we are undermining other disciplines like history, or we are undermining other disciplines like political science or politics, as it were. By the way, let us not also forget, like the last speaker said, that intelligence is an extremely multidimensional discipline, but it must be situated within, a sphere of discipline. It must be situated, and that's why you find them, in politics, Department of Politics, or you find them in the Department of History in the advanced countries of the world. I do not think that we need to go to, to what is generally practiced, let's say in Europe, or let's say in the United States, because I find injustification in domiciling those disciplines there in Europe and in the United States, and cannot find that level of justification, in domiciling intelligence and security studies in politics or in history in Africa. This is my proposition, which of course I know will open up, vista for a lot of debates. But I'm saying this based on my personal experiences in the course of teaching this program. And let me bring a little, subject to our notice. In the last few years, I was teaching some police officers the concept of community policing, for instance, which has to do with public safety, and working out, a very congenial relationship between the police as an institution and the community. And if you go through the history of community policing, what you will see more often than not will be the work of Robert Peel, how it started in Europe and the United States, and probably started in Africa in the 1980s, and so on and so forth. And you and I know that these narratives are not supposed to be true, because I would rather wish that social scientists should credit Africa as a cradle of community policing, because we've had that, even though they target informal policing. Because if we now begin to teach our students in Africa that community policing started, in Europe, and came down to Africa in the 80s, then we'll begin to wonder, because one of them asked me that, Prof, in the 70s, and the early 80s, we live in rural areas, and the community was in charge of all form of security, and of course, they liaised with the police as much as possible, and things were working out very well. That we are supposed to refer to that as community policing, and I said to a great extent, that is community policing, but who documented it? Who wrote the history for us? So that's my worry, that if we flow along Western imposition, we will fall off the track. Let us have an indigenous domiciliation of intelligence and security studies in the Department of Sociology and Social Anthropology. Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Okay. Colleagues, when we started, we said we are going to discuss how intelligence is practiced and how intelligence is studied and how intelligence is theorized. I think the thesis that has just been presented to us by Prof. Nde is a very provocative thesis. I saw Prof. Ndlovu, who happens to be a historian, shaking his head. But I can assure you, as a sociologist, I'm bored to the idea already of taking intelligence studies, housing it in sociology. We will hold on some of the questions, comments that we might be having in keeping with established traditions of holding our horses, right? So that we go to our third panelist, Dr. Lincoln Cave, colleague. I hope he's there. I know he was running a multiple, engagements today. I hope he's ready for us. And Prof. Nde, thank you very much. Well appreciated. It's a thesis that we need to take. Colleagues, all these presentations, the first, the second, the third, the fourth, and mine, which was not presented, right? 5 already. And the invitation that is being extended to all of you who are here and those who are virtual to contribute chapters to a book that we are going to put together. That is one side of the story. But also, because as we said, the Journal of Policing, Intelligence, and Counterterrorism gave us space. You need to go to that special issue on frontiers in African intelligence studies and make contributions, because we were given space to start debates. So those debates are not going to die. We have to make sure that we make contributions to the book and to the special edition. I have put in front of you the do's and don'ts of the special issue, what to consider when you are putting together. All I can tell you is that the editors are the most stringent, the way they work. They will make you perspire, but at the end, you will feel very good with the product. With that, can we let Dr. Cave in, please?
Esteemed academics, honorable guests, scholars of this subject and profession, thank you for the opportunity. I hope that I'll be able to share my screen now. Just get it in there. I hope it's visible. Thank you very much. The speakers before me have really laid a foundation for the discussion. So I'm going to really take a practitioner's head and put it on and look a bit inward. So I'm dealing with oversight, and really it is just an overview reflection as the heading indicates. So the outline largely is really to cover briefly what does the concept of oversight entail, what does literature say currently about the subject matter, what are the challenges, and that will be really located in the context of the African scholar literature specifically. And then my contributory intent is really to underscore the point that while the models and processes of oversight is really a primary area of focus, I believe there's sufficient room to focus attention also on a part of oversight that deals with where its localization, because ultimately internal oversight, which is the institutional part of oversight, becomes an area of discourse within the array of literature, specifically if you look at stakeholders like the public, the media that expose a lot of the, or lack of a better word, shenanigans, the bad, the negative of what happens around our intelligence services. Then the second part is to contextualize it within the context of normative standards, theoretical context, the approach followed in terms of getting to the results and findings, briefly a conceptual framework, And then the results and discussions is really to highlight by way of two case studies. One, governance areas of oversight utilizing about 10 countries on the African continent. And then CISA's institutional governance framework, which is also a recent article that is part of the contributions to what Prof. Lebakeng has raised, and it will be out due as well. But for me, it was fundamental to anchor it within a specific model. Hopefully, that would be a positive contribution for especially the aspirant intelligence practitioners and scholars that's emerging in postgrad studies. And then conclusion, just summary and suggestions in terms of way forward. So oversight largely as a concept has three distinct elements. And it is drawing again, and I'm hopefully not supposed to be too biased, but South African context is very loaded with experiences. We also have the 30 years of celebration, 2025, since the formation of democratic institutions of our statutory intelligence community. The research literature also shows that it is quite used extensively as a case reference. So I'm following suit. So in this context, if you look at literature available even from our parliamentary as institution, the legal context given to the definition is that it is considered to be informal, watchful, strategic, and structured scrutiny process that is exercised by, in the case of parliamentary oversight, legislatures, in respect of the implementation of laws, the application of budget, ensuring that there's due responsibility assigned to political principles in pursuit of delivering services, and in our case, achieving a better quality of life for all South Africans. The intent is really sixfold. And if you look at the slide, these principles defined, you would find in largely all of the African countries' apex legislation, speaking to an ethical culture, that there's legal obligation, that there's a need for due care. So the intent of oversight is really to detect, prevent abuse, arbitrary behavior, and I locate that also in later reference, the whole issue of discretionary power by political principles and institutional leadership. So it is also in this context that the intent of oversight is to hold government to account in respect of use of public funds, as an example, to ensure that policies that are drafted and announced by government is authorized by Parliament and given effect through implementation processes and strategies by the relevant intelligence fraternities. Uppermost is also where stakeholder engagement comes in, is to improve the transparency of government by making sure that it advances its national security mandate with a distinct normative focus. The perspectives are largely focus on, again, from a Westminster perspective, most of the former British colonies, which South Africa is one, is that it inherited the oversight approach where it is rather located adversarial and oversight is located in opposition politicians and perceived not to be the domain of legislators as an institution. Debatable issue, we know as it has progressed. That's how it is viewed. Also, we have seen from a parliamentary oversight perspective, the executive oversight angle or dimension, it is either highly centralized, residing in the presidency, which we have seen also that development unfolding in the recent years, or it evolves to parliamentary oversight. Scholars argue that oversight is a recent development, hence also the limited definitions around what it entails. Linked to that is then also, while there has been consistent security sector reform across Africa, the implementation of oversight and making sure that adoption of sustained and effective oversight institutions is still fragmented and inadequate. The political and intelligence cultures are really determining factors to how oversight is also promoted, advocated, and institutionalized to make it real, practical, and effective. So those are areas where it also an area for in terms of challenges or gaps in research. Intelligence oversight and intelligence control as concept tend to be used interchangeably by scholars, with a few making a distinction between one to the other. So that is also an area that creates a bit of, do we deal with it as consistent? Is it synonymous one to the other, or is it different? The challenge is largely confined to politicization that impedes the ability of these institutions really to anchor their core function as key policy instrument, as a risk mitigation tool, and to provide quality compliance assurance to government in terms of the threats and opportunities at national, regional, continental, and international. How the objectives of a government can be advanced. The responsibility are anchored in the stewardship characterization. Ultimately, the vanguards to ensure that political programs translate into tangible outcomes for the citizenry postulates for a stewardship position. Hence, the disjointness and the implementation and monitoring that becomes the challenge overall in terms of oversight, whether it is at the executive level, at the judicial level, at the institutional level as well. Gaps in research, I literally had to look at where are the problems. And while it is sufficiently written about the other dimensions of oversight, the internal oversight is really the area where institutions need to give effect to government programs, as I've said, where the problem locates. Institutional governance, because linked to that is the problem of discretionary power, where it is perceived that what we understand also the whole notion of management prerogative or political prerogative, that it comes automatic with a process and it is really devoid from any normative of legal standard. Now I want to quickly highlight from Bock and Estlund, who argues that prerogative provide guidance on the issue of consultation. From a normative standpoint, they argue that the use of prerogative should not be viewed as a means of exerting dominance that undermines effective, equitable, and transparent decision-making. Two examples from a former minister of the SSA as a case reference. In 2020, the minister of the SSA, Ayanda Dlodlo, pursued a legal injunction against the EFF to stop the party to distribute the leaked report of the OIGI on the so-called illegal intelligence structure in the South African Revenue Service. What happened was the minister instance followed a duty-bound obligation under specific sections of the National Intelligence Service Act to ensure the protection of classified information, intelligence processes, identity of sources, as well as those of members employed in the SSA. So this exercise exemplifies a principled approach to accountability with decision which can be considered from a normative standpoint, both ethical and legal. In contrast, later on, during the Zondo Commission, the same minister tried to stop the then acting DG from testifying at the commission by citing possible threats to national security, which demonstrate a different ethical disposition. In this instance, the chair of the commission determined there was no justification for claiming that national security will be compromised and deemed the minister's actions unethical. So the whole issue of decision-making in the context of discretionary powers becomes really an area that impedes the effective oversight function even at the institutional level. Linked to that is also the extent to which stakeholder engagement is pursued and how we determine then public value for these institutions. as well as public value that derives from intelligence oversight, not only in South Africa, but across the countries of the continent. So that circle just highlights the interconnectedness in speaking to the whole issue of they are related and intertwined to the oversight approach. On the side, accountability model, largely literature informs that we have to a degree the model and process up perhaps the Inspector General, and the previous speakers have alluded to the discrepancy and the disjuncture in literature, also highlighting that is not a standard norm for all countries. For me, the area is really in the institutional oversight level. What happens from the minister down to the rest of the practitioners, the institutional leadership in dealing with the accountability on oversight? So the material and methods that I've applied is really to say that normative, I looked at social constructivism because it provides a deeper insight compared to realist approaches, for example. It also is commonly used and more frequent in the understanding of intelligence and security studies in the context of international relations. The methodology is grounded in the grounded theory as applicable medium for its consistent use in qualitative research across disciplines. It allows for a systematic process of inquiry as well, and able to generate develop inductive theory and pattern of meaning. So it is consistent also in terms of comparative analysis and theoretical sampling. Then the conceptual framework is really institutional governance, because at the end of the day, the conceptual framework, which is defined by concepts, assumptions, expectations, beliefs, and theories, support and inform the framework to explain organizational legitimacy as well as sustainability. And these are key normative standards, legitimacy and sustainability, if only but these two, that impacts the understanding and challenges around oversight in its practical sense. So if I look then at some other frameworks, I looked at the oversight analytical framework in terms of applicability. It has two positives. One, that it considers internal, external factors that influence legislative oversight performance. The second one is that it considers the committee system, party dynamics, chamber procedures as not solely determining the effectiveness of oversight. However, some scholars include it, and they argue also the inclusion that it is also argued from the premise that international development organizations have a bearing on how it is framed and understood. But for me, it's really localized. And I think the description here shows where it covers by way of this light as a symbol. And it does not cover the lower level in terms of institutions. So it's for that reason that I believe that the corporate governance theoretical framework is more suited, because from a normative stance and a constructivist approach, it's defined by rules, practices, and structures. Adding to that, you have the suitability theory. You also have the, which assisted by the legitimacy theory, requiring legitimacy of institutions to maintain functional long-term relations. So, broadly speaking, the defined role, scope, and responsibility of institutional oversight, broadly, have all these actors in play. We have seen legislative oversight. The Zondo Commission have alluded to the challenges. They have made pronouncements also on suggestions how to ensure effective and efficiency of parliamentary processes. In terms of the executive oversight, the same commission also made recommendations on the effectiveness of executive oversight. We know there are challenges there, and one of them was also highlighted by the report on the 21 January riot, that the National Security Council needs to be effective. there has been disparities in terms of when did it start operating thereafter, but also the engagement from stakeholders, involving stakeholders, is also an issue that is not giving the necessary traction. At ministerial level, we have a coordinating function. Literature from scholars also allude to the fact that when you look at a South African model of oversight, coordination is a problem. But however, we have the cluster system, we have NICOG that by law have this specific role to make sure that it gives effect thereto. Our institutional governance framework, we might say, yes, we have appointed responsibilities, officials, work functions, but what is the institutional government framework really supposed to look like? And this is where I'm going to come to give a model of how do you deal then, what are the strategic objectives of intelligence by way of utilizing the CISA as a model, and what should be the measuring tool to look at how the strategic outcomes are achieved. We have our regulatory bodies, the OIGI, the Treasury, the Auditor General. We have revamped legislation to make sure that they strengthen the oversight mechanisms. And we have the judiciary that has played a significant role. But also in there is the discourse around how effective has it been. What we have seen currently, also the interplay between the current Mkonazi Commission as well as which supposed to argue some, and I'm one of them, to say, but if we have oversight functions, should they not play their role? Why is it that we look at the judiciary whenever there's a problem? Does it mean then the legitimacy of these institutions are so contaminated or questioned that they are not allowed to play their function? And that does not dilute or negate from the function that there is, if there is a problem, obviously the legislative process needs to take its course. But if we look at the issue of due process, this needs to be also acknowledged in this broader scope. So all of them are stakeholders. But we know that the challenge of stakeholder engagement, the public, is sometimes omitted from this whole process. We see the national dialogue as an example to those issues. Now, why I emphasize oversight and balance it against corporate governance as a model is really you can merge it with, on the one side, the principles that I've highlighted, what oversight is supposed to bring about, and then the governance principles at the one side that are really derived from best practice voluntary principles. In this instance is the King Code. Lead ethically and effectively, govern risks. So whose responsibilities are these? The interplay between the minister and institutional appointees up to the lowest level. Everyone has a responsibility. But accountability, there needs to be those that govern and those that manage. And this is where the discrepancy comes in, and also the problem of discretionary power that there's overreach and where political influence come in. So this model speaks to really how best to deal with it in ensuring oversight at institutional level, but even at the levels higher up. The whole notion of the professionalization agenda
Dr.
currently...
Keith, I'm sure you have 2 seconds.
Okay. I just wanted to quickly go to CISA. Using just a quick example. One of the strategies is to provide leadership to intelligence and security matters in furtherance of peace and security. How is that measured? In the article, I highlight that it can only be measured by way of these 4: effective control, good performance, legitimacy, and ethical culture. And those are currently, if you're able to read the article, you'll be able to appreciate that it remains a key provider of strategic intelligence to the AUC and PSC. It promotes collaboration between member services. It is instrumental in giving effect because it has a mandate which anchors its legitimacy, and the advancement of the common good are central then to its ethical culture. Apologies. It has been a load of focus, but I just wanted to conclude by saying unity of effort has to happen at nation state with all stakeholders involved, and continental cooperation, how the advocacy role from CISA is also important. The public value characterization must be anchored in a stewardship posture. The accountability angle requires institutional and leadership integrity. Separation of power is key to understand that political prerogative has a distinct role between governance and manage. Future research, I promote the notion that institutional governance frameworks needs to be anchored to make intelligence practice really sustainable, reliable, and effective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Cave. I always say to students, this idea that intelligence practice is a loose field. People do as they wish. People kill people. People steal money and so on. Overlooks one fundamental thing that, in democracies, there is oversight and accountability. And therein lies the importance of Dr. Cave's presentation. It is not a loose field where people do as they wish. In fact, I always say, if you go to intelligence services all over the world, you find the most handsome men are in intelligence, with good-hearted people. So the idea, I think he has just demystified and demolished that idea. Colleagues, without any waste of time, can we go to our last panelist? And I'm sure you have prepared yourselves for questions. I've seen that online people have written so much. I'm not even sure if we'll be able to go through the comments that have been, posted online. With that, can we go now to Botswana, our neighbor, and see if Dr. Kibapezi Letsoa is there. Doc, you are welcome if you are there.
Good morning, colleagues. I think it's still morning. I hope I'm audible. Am I audible?
You are.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to share my screen, but it's just one slide. I'm not a big fan of PowerPoint. My names, as mentioned, are Kibapetse Lotshwao. I work for the University of Botswana as a senior lecturer in political science. Besides that, I've been head of the department here of politics and administration for the last 5 years now. Besides teaching and research, I sometimes do consultancy work. I have a small company, and it provides services on security, among others, on governance and politics and the like. And I think I've in the past done work, for instance, on due diligence, where some actors like investors, multinational corporations, when they want to set up operations here, they want background information about the country, about certain actors. Yeah, and the likes. I've done work on that. But before I focus on my short presentation, allow me to thank the the organizers of this conference, particularly Prof. Lebakeng and Dr. Gwetiwa, and say that my presentation is largely anchored on the journal article published in the special issue by Journal of Policing, Intelligence and Counterterrorism that colleagues have referred to. But you see, allow me to state up front that I think that the Department of Political Science is the natural home of intelligence studies. I'm a political scientist myself, and political science is concerned about the state and how it is governed. And intelligence agencies are state institutions. They have roles that they play in the day-to-day running of the state or the international system of states. Allow me to also state upfront that in my observation, I have concluded that a significant number of people who work on intelligence studies actually their work has limitations. And the main limitation is that in most instances, like I've been listening, colleagues are able to describe institutions, they are able to identify gaps in governance, they are able to talk about accountability, whether it's strong, whether it's weak. They talk about politicization of intelligence. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. But what I think is missing most of the time is to provide something of an explanation why things are the way they are. If intelligence is politicized, why is it politicized? If oversight is weak, why is it weak? And if we can answer this question, we cannot answer these questions without actually, in the case of the state, we cannot answer these questions without actually discussing the nature of the state and the type of political system in place. And that is why I've argued and continue to argue that most of the works that exist, they divorce intelligence studies from the political system, from the way a particular state or the way the international system functions and is organized, the interests that it serves at any particular time in history. To demonstrate these arguments, these points, I use the case of Botswana. Botswana, as you are aware, is the longest running multi-party democracy in the African continent. The country has, unlike other African countries, never abandoned multi-party politics since independence in 1966 to the present. We know that until last year, for 58 years, the country was ruled by one political party, the Botswana Democratic Party. And the BDP was actually retaining power every 5 years. That retention of power had more to do with the party's performance as a ruling party. At independence, for instance, Botswana was among the poorest countries in the world, no infrastructure, no health facilities, nothing. But the BDP, through the developmental state model funded by diamond revenues, was able to transform the country from that state of underdevelopment to what is being referred to as an upper middle income economy. But the BDP was actually a coalition of economic actors built around the leading sectors of the economy at the time of independence. And that is why many people within the BDP were either cattle barons, were either merchants and traders. They were involved in different sectors of the economy. And therefore, as much as there was development, there was progress, but to a large extent, the system also advanced the interests of the class at the helm of the ruling party. But what happened over the years is that the BDP started to decline its legitimacy. I use legitimacy as a neutral word. Otherwise, my work is grounded in Gramscian theory. I would use the word hegemony. Its legitimacy or hegemony started to decline in the from the mid-80s all the way up to the 1990s. And the decline had more to do with the fact that the government was failing in some respects. Job creation, for instance, the economy was not being diversified. There was corruption, abuse of state by those in power, elite impunity. Combined, these things led to the decline of the BDP. And as could be expected, when the BDP started to decline, they tried to find ways of actually reinventing themselves, renewing their legitimacy, renewing their hegemony. And that is why in the late 1990s, the BDP brought into its ranks a man named Ian Khama. Ian Khama is the son of the founding president, Saraza Khama. He was coming from the military where he had been commander. He's also a chief of one of the tribes. He served from 1998 to 2008 as vice president. Then from 2008 to 2018 as president. Before that, he had been commander of the Botswana Defense Force from 1989 to 1998. So the BDP believed that Khama would actually, as a charismatic figure, links to the father, having been outside politics and therefore not affected by some of the problems that afflicted the party at the time, would be able to help renew the party's legitimacy or hegemony. But the Khama family is actually one of the families and the groups that have been the main beneficiaries of the post-colonial Botswana state in economic terms. This is a family that has always had one individual or controlling an important state institution. either as president, as commander, as vice president, or president. But it appears that when Khama came on board, his mission was different from that of the BDP. The BDP may have brought him to power in an effort to renew its legitimacy, but it looks like Khama's mission was to restore the dominance and the control of the state that his family had enjoyed since the time of independence. And that is why under Khama, the intelligence had been there in the form of either special branch after independence or some units within the police and the like. But it was when Khama ascended to the presidency that Botswana established an autonomous state intelligence agency called the Directorate of Intelligence and Security Services, the DIS. And during Khama's rule for those 10 years, the DIS became notorious for abuse of power, for human rights violations. A lot of people wrote about activities of the DIS, how abusive it was, how politicized it was, how unaccountable it was, which is fine. But the bigger question is they were failing to explain why things were the way they are. And I think I've attempted to provide an answer to say that, in my view, the DIS was actually conceived not necessarily as a credible intelligence organization existing for the purpose of supporting the state in provision of intelligence information, but it was conceived more, in my view, as an instrument of coercion used by Khama and his government to actually coerce society, to keep everyone in check, so that when everyone is suppressed, everyone is fearful, everyone is coerced, then Khama and his people can capture the state and use the state to restore the dominance that they had, and also use the state to advance their economic interests at the expense of everyone else. That is why, in my view, even when you talk about accountability, from the onset, the DIS was never meant to be accountable. Never. The act establishing the DIS, for instance, provides for accountability in the form of a parliamentary committee, as well as an appeals tribunal. But if you take the parliamentary committee, for instance, on intelligence, it is the only parliamentary committee in Botswana that was appointed not by parliament itself, but instead by the president. How can the head of an executive appoint a parliamentary committee for a supposedly independent institution like parliament? If you take the tribunals the members of the tribunal are appointed by the president. What happened during Khama's time is that there are instances where Khama appointed members of the ruling party, members of people with family links to him, to the tribunal. And when that happened, it actually compounded the problem of absence of accountability on the DIS. The DIS was actually able to ride, to coerce, to abuse, and that is the time in the history of Botswana where, for the first time, we came to hear about practices like extrajudicial killings. We came to hear about people being found dead with no explanation whatsoever. And the act establishing the DIS also makes the Director General the chief advisor to the President on issues of security. And the manner of appointment is actually unilateral. They are appointed by the President without involving any other actor, in the process creating a personal relationship between the Director General and the President. And during Khama's time and the time of his predecessor, Masisi, the DIS was actually out of control. Raiding other institutions, for instance, during Masisi's time, there's a time when the DIS raided the anti-corruption body. One state institution raiding the other. It undermined activities of other state institutions. It has arrested the police commissioner. It has arrested ministers. But that kind of behavior may have also contributed to the further decline of the ruling party, culminating in its ultimate defeat last year. Of course, there are other challenges: corruption, unemployment affecting the youth, and the like. So there's been change of government in November last year. But as much as the DIS was conceived under Khama and used as an instrument under him, as well as under his successor, it appears that the way the DIS is conceived, it's open to abuse by any sitting president, such that any incoming president may be in a position to actually assign it the new functions that advance his or her immediate interests at any given time.
Dr.
Yes, please.
You have a second. The good thing is that you have captured some of these issues in your article. So the audience will not be just force them to go and read the article. Don't tell them everything. Can you conclude within a second?
Allow me to conclude by saying that although there's been change of government, it doesn't look like the DIS will be reformed. The Director General who was in place under Masisi is still there. And what the new president has done is to retain that guy who everyone wanted to go. The new president has also appointed one of his close friends and somebody who has worked in the president's law firm. He's one of the deputy director generals of the DIS, in what, in my view, looks like an effort or an attempt by the new government and the new president to also capture the DIS and use it for the end that he wants. Thank you, Prof. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. With that, you would recall that when we started, we said the purpose is to look at how intelligence is practiced. I think you have just seen an instance of that, how intelligence is studied, and how it's theorized. I think if you look at the 4 presentations, they have basically covered all that. And for that, let's give our panelists a round of applause. I have a stack of what people have been writing down. I will not be able to go through everything, but just one says, Dr. Katiwa, thank you for the most insightful presentation. Since 2020, the Faculty of Military Science at Stellenbosch University has taught intelligence and defense intelligence as part of the undergraduate module at Saldanha. 2 groups have graduated. As the Thabo Mbeki has now taken intelligence studies further at graduate level, interest is growing. The old sense of taboo is fading. I think that is part of what we intend to accomplish through making academia and practitioners come together. And what we have seen is exactly that. Now, we could keep our questions for now and then allow those who want to make not speeches, but comments, right? And I normally don't do this. I know he's worried. Sir, that gentleman there behind you, you know there is a revolution. There is a revolution that is taking place, right? In intelligence. And one of those is really how Caesar, if you don't mind, has adjusted to the move to sharing information, given the culture in Africa of the need to know. How are they handling the need to share? In few seconds, can you help us with that? I know it's an ambush.
You have ambushed me. Well, firstly, I must indicate. Sorry, I have a little bit of a flu.
Like the Prof.
Yes, I must indicate that I'm happy to see interest in intelligence work. And secondly is we have to demystify intelligence in a big way. Thirdly, what is intelligence? What is intelligence? Is the information that I get outside there intelligence? It's not for me to answer that question. But I think as an intelligence officer, one, you have to be grounded in the subject matter. Subject matter is not intelligence. Subject matter is, for example, economic intelligence. So you have to be grounded in economics. You have to understand what is it that is in the economic subject. Now, the aspect of intelligence and services is to engage on an offensive and a defensive operations. That is the aspect, offensive and defensive. A prof has asked me to comment on CISA. Now, you have to have clarity of thought with regard to intelligence service, the creation as well as the intention to create. What is your intention to create intelligence services? On the establishment of CISA, we would recall that it was few years after the African Union was established. And African Union was established from the OAU, from the African Organization of African Unity. Immediately after the establishment of AU leadership decided that we have to keep borders as they are. That was the protocol that AU reached. And from keeping the borders as they are, we have to ensure development. So Africa has to develop. But then there was a missing link. How do you ensure the development of 50 plus countries at the time? I think there were 52 at the time, if I'm not mistaken. And the heads of state and government decided that there should be NEPAD, New Partnership on African Development. As this is happening, the heads of intelligence services and security service didn't sit idle. They said, for NEPAD to be able to work as intelligence services, we must support NEPAD. And as a result, what was called NISCO was established. Basically, NISCO, or countries that were spearheading this, was South Africa, Algeria, Nigeria, and Ethiopia. You would recall that Prime Minister Meles was actually the one chairing NEPAD at the time. So there was a clear intention of having this intelligence and security establishment supporting NEPAD. Clear, very clear intention on economic development. But this intention or objective of NEPAD was for all the countries of Africa. So how do we ensure that all the countries benefit? And how do we ensure that the aim of the African Union at the time to silence the guns is achieved. Because you can't talk development on this side and on the other side, people are fighting. So we had to, sorry, now I'm saying we, I'm exposing myself.
Yeah, just conclude in a second.
In a second,
You have already exposed yourself. And there's a reason I was asking you to make a comment because so that people can understand. Somebody talked about CISA, but CISA comes from something. So it was important that you raise that as a practitioner.
CISA comes from NISCO, CISA comes from the fact that countries in Africa wanted to silence the guns and actually to ensure that there is development in Africa. But then what was important with CISA in its inception was that you had different intelligence philosophies. For example, most in Southern Africa and East Africa are civilian intelligence services. If you go to Central Africa, West Africa, and North Africa, they are from military intelligence. It was then very important to say for CISA to be fit for purpose, how do you then integrate these cultures and these philosophies? And CISA is one of the examples of the home-brewed organizations in Africa. We didn't go outside to say we want to see the best practices somewhere else. Home-brewed, because I have exposed myself, even Prof was one of the key pillars who established.
Can you stop now? Yeah, colleagues, yeah, it's enough. It's enough. Colleagues, can we have comments? Short comments. I allowed the colleague deliberately as a practitioner. So, but there he goes, ba. Yes, Jim.
So my interest fundamentally in the discussion is how intelligence is studied, because for me that became one of the important elements in the entire panels. A few things came out for me, and I thank the panelists for engaging this. There were two things that were coming out extensively. One, intelligence being used for nefarious ends, but also intelligence being used for positive ends. That came out in the conversation. And therefore, I thought, based on that, it is the reason that Professor Nche from Nigeria then came with a proposal which was very provocative to move the intelligence into the sociology department or social anthropology. And my reasoning of how to look at these conversations that have took place now is that if you look at intelligence being used for nefarious ends and for positive ends, it means at some point when we teach or study intelligence, we perhaps might have to look at it in a John Rawls approach, where we look at intelligence not only as intelligence because you want to demystify it, but you look at intelligence as a positive intelligence and negative intelligence. Because if you listen to our doctor from Botswana, he talks about the intelligence services established in Botswana for a negative purpose, according to his observation. So I'm then beginning to think that if we want to consider intelligence not as a grand master narrative where intelligence must be discussed only in the essence of the state, but also intelligence as intelligence that includes the community intelligence, private intelligence, and so on and so forth. It would be easy then to study intelligence considering the positive and negative intelligence using John Rawls' approach, because that would then help us to say, instead of removing intelligence from security studies or removing intelligence from the political sciences, you expand intelligence to other areas rather than to say, remove it. It must go to sociology or it must go to social anthropology. You are just saying, for the purposes of positive intelligence, you expand it to other faculties rather than to say, remove it here and place it there,
Thank
which
you.
is very
I hope
problematic.
Prof. Nte is listening to that input. Somebody said intelligence is transdisciplinary, so that could be an issue. Colleagues, so that we don't let those who are online, I'll read another inputs. Certain Supermandla Zondi, I think, who has written. This is very interesting. This underdevelopment of intelligence studies might also be connected to the fact that strategic studies is also infant area of studies in Africa to this day. That is Prof. Zondi. We will continue with more inputs. I've been looking at this site as if I'm a right wing. I also want to be a left. Anybody? Any comment? Any comment? Okay, let's go there.
No, thanks, Mafrika. Sipho Mantula from the TM school. I think from my side, learning from the four colleagues, what they have given us is to say, what are the new developments in the continent? And I think what Seppo touched is the issue of external interference. One part that I will have urged, and I think it is very important, is the question that was posed here about what is intelligence. There's a question of information here. It's a question of collection. It's a question of analysis. And it's a question of a product. I think that is in short. But for me, what I picked up in the African continent, it is the practice of us looking at the West, to say the UK, the US. But for me, I know that the Ethiopia in the late 80s had already intelligence structures. And I think if we can follow their move, was the community intelligence division, which was spying on others also, to ensure that there is an issue of trust, there's an issue of competency. And the last part is the issue of human rights and the law, that I think intelligence must also not be localized or domiciled, into sociology also, even into law, because the issue of access to information is key. The issue also around accountability, and where we don't have a rogue element that we saw with the high-level panel review, Yagama Fumadi, and that's where I want to see it. And maybe the final point about CISA, I don't know if maybe you can confirm it. It's CISA strategically also a collecting point, or it is just sharing? For me, it is a question that I want to know. Is CISA collecting, or it is analyzing the 54 member states reports? What then is the role of CISA? But I can see there is an answer from my right here once more. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, we'll get into that. Maybe we need to clarify one thing first. That in the debates on intelligence, there are various schools of thought in intelligence studies. That's maybe our starting point. There are those who focus on process. Intelligence is a process. There are those who say intelligence is a product. And there are those who say intelligence is a mission. And lastly, those who say intelligence is an organization. So these are the general debates. So sometimes you might say, as a mission, but that is just part of the broad understanding of what intelligence is. In one or two words, is CISA collecting or just sharing? I'm not so sure if you can share if you don't collect. But anyway, what is it that you're sharing if you don't collect?
Prof, the CISA has regional structures. For example, there would be Southern Africa, East Africa, you name it.
West, North.
West, North. Now, let me start here. Conflict may arise in a particular country, and the services in that country would not want to disclose the stability conditions in the country. But you have a neighboring country that would have an understanding of what is happening in country A. So in that region, the countries are supposed to interact and collaborate in terms of the stability profile of the region. But if one person from the country A, which is beginning to be unstable or instability is creeping in, are not reporting the issue, the person in the neighboring country is supposed to question and raise issues in terms of the instability in country A. So then agree in the region that the stability profile in this region is in this fashion.
Okay, can we leave it there and not go into details?
Okay, let me just then all the reports from the region would be sent to Addis Ababa. And that's where further analysis in terms of the stability profile of the continent is carried out.
Yes, colleagues. Problem case. It's afternoon. Okay,
I think what has emerged from our experts this morning is that although they are trying to locate intelligence either in history, political science, sociology, wherever, but I think the bottom line is intelligence is so important. That's number one. And my submission is that since intelligence is important to help policymakers to make informed decisions. And where do you find policymakers? You find them in public administration. So maybe one might say, like the advocate, bring it to law. Maybe the public administrators might say, bring it to us. So I think what is important is what do we have to do to institutionalize intelligence? Because if you check in Africa, how many universities are teaching intelligence? Maybe in South Africa we have 2 or 3. That is very little, given the importance of what intelligence is all about. But my brother, you made quite an interesting point. I find it very intriguing because I used to consider diplomacy and intelligence as twins, boy and a girl. But what you've just shared with us today is that once you put these two twins in one room, there is always that tension that because the diplomat doesn't want the I to be mentioned while they are together. Maybe if you could teach us more on that one, because from where I'm sitting, there are so many commonalities between diplomats and intelligence officers. One is, like you've rightfully pointed out, that the idea is to defend in advance national interest. And how do we do it? They collect, analyze, and process whatever Prof. Lebakeng would, the word you would like to, the information or the intelligence. But your submission today was quite informative in a sense that one has realized that the two may not necessarily be involved in a, what you call symbiotic relationship. Maybe if you could elaborate on that one. Thank you.
Okay, we will give the colleagues a time to respond, but you are not alone. There is actually been a journal of, I think, diplomacy and intelligence. And some people say the difference between intelligence and diplomacy is that one reports back door, the other one reports front door. That's the simplest way. Colleagues, let's not forget those who are online. There are a few others that we might read. Tebu Khomashilo says, congratulations to the TM School for your milestone in the teaching of intelligence studies. The dearth of literature on intelligence in Africa requires great effort from all of us and all those who are concerned. Manuel Bishaka, spot on, Dr. Cave, on oversight and accountability of intelligence. I think we still have a long way to go, especially in case of emerging democracies. And then he goes on again to say, sometimes the system in place puts confusion on the very essence of accountability we seek. Intelligence report to the executive, and this matter, the president. I think that he locates the problem there where intelligence reports with which then questions us with the recommendations of the panel of experts that we have placed intelligence under the ambit of the president in South Africa. Colleagues, we can continue with our comments and questions. Yes, sir. There is one from here, and then I see the other one, and then the third one. Could we allow, after the three, that we allow the colleagues who want to respond to any of the issues that have been raised, please?
Prof, thanks. The name is Lucky Pechud. It's a clarity-seeking question. Is the debate not about form over substance? Location of intelligence, whether sociology, anthropology, and political science, that's one. Professor...
That's directed to Prof. Nte, right?
Yes, Prof. Nte, yeah. And the second one is also directed to Prof. Nte again. He mentioned that Africa, I think we suffer from three things, I think, or we are weak in economic, intelligence, I forgot the third one. Does that not tell more about the state of intelligence in Africa? What does it say about our intelligence if those three are still standing and according to me, they are very crucial for the sustenance of the continent.
In his defense, I think the second question he has answered. That's why he wants the relocation. Because, I think he has answered that. Maybe we should allow him to answer the first question.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, yes, sir.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Prof. my understanding of, or my limited understanding of intelligence in terms of its role is that it sort of plays a supportive role in terms of advancing the objective of peace and security. So in light of that, the African continent has so many conflicts in terms, intrastate conflicts. So, in view of that reality, does that mean that intelligence on the African continent is not at the level where it should be in terms of aiding policymakers to sort of initiate preventative measures, to sort of prevent conflicts from emerging? Because after all, intelligence is supposed to play, a preventative role from from my perspective, you see. So we have got so many conflicts. You can, just to wrap
question.
up. Yeah, just to,
The last question.
Thank you. My name is Silas from ICASA. My question goes to Prof from Botswana. I just wanted to find out from them if there is any equivalent of Inspector General of Intelligence that oversees the DCIS. As it has been his observation, and it has been mine as well, that the intelligence in Botswana is being manipulated. It has been manipulated for years. I mean, I personally, like when I visited Botswana in 2012, and I made a call, I mentioned the president's name. And then everybody was like afraid, hey, the president is listening to you. Don't mention the president's name. So I got concerned. Why is the president listening to a citizen? I mean, a normal citizen's calls. Like everybody was afraid, just for mentioning the president's name. I was not even saying anything. They said, no, you must never repeat that again. You see, so I got concerned to say why is it that the whole president is concerned about anyone mentioning his name? You see, yes, if you can please clarify that.
Colleagues, we have agreed that we'll ask 3 questions and then ask the colleagues to respond. They will have each about 7 minutes to respond. If we still have time, we'll engage, but let us, since they are the ones who made the presentations, right? They are the ones who should respond to this. Can we start with Tsepo? And by the way, Tsepo there, it's very late. I'm sure he's sleeping. Are you still up? Tsepo, are you still up? Yeah, it's very late actually for him. And Prof, are you still coping with the flu?
Yeah, I'm still up. It's a problem.
You could hear some of the questions.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes. Oh, well, yeah. Just respond to whatever or make final.
So the audio and the okay.
We can hear you.
All right. Yes.
Can you respond to some of the issues that have been raised? Some people have made comments.
Respond to Professor Mchiza's comment on the link between diplomacy and intelligence.
Yeah, there is a problem. There is a problem. Okay, let's leave it, Tsepo, and hope that you can incorporate it in your paper because we can't hear. Okay? Just raise your raise your hand to show that you hear that we are going to the next person because we can't hear anything. If I call the other one.
Just remember.
Okay. Can we go to Prof. Nte now?
Okay.
Yeah, if he will be clear. Let's hear Prof. Nte. Prof. Nte. We are now missing the nice Jews because the presentations were so good.
Yes, I'm saying, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes. You have 5 minutes to conclude and respond to any of the issues that were raised. Okay? Prof. Nte?
Yes, yes. I'm not audible there.
Try. We can't hear anything.
Hello?
Yes. Yeah, the line is bad. Okay, try to respond. We'll try to listen. We tried, right? We also had a problem with the other one. Unless there are people who have just.
Let's try to say a few things.
Yeah.
That's what I said. One thing is how to, kind of have a template. Intelligence stories in Africa. I'm going to just study it, in the Department of Transportation. I would say that from my experience, I feel like it's important, the important of institutions, because that is anything that has survived so far. The way to probably policy and how to make it work.
Yeah. Prof, I think we are having problems with connection. Prof, having problems with connection with everybody, which is very unfortunate. But let me say some of the comments that were made. I hope you should be able to incorporate them in your paper, either in the way that you respond to them, why it cannot be like that. They should be considered. I think the issue of your thesis is very, very important, and we'll be talking about it further. The line is so bad, we can't hear anything. You are not the only one. I don't know if Dr. K has any final words. There are things that were said, and we can also go to Botswana for final words if any of you. Dr. Kevin, are you still there? Maybe we should have just bought them tickets to come, ne? Yeah, we should have just bought them tickets. So we thought we were saving. But at least.
Just could actually.
Yes.
Multitasking at this stage.
Yeah, just.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Grammar.
No, I think they've squeezed us. Somebody has squeezed us. CISA people have squeezed us. You see, that, that's, that's the problem with somebody did say something here.
Yes.
He says, welcome to the live chat. And then he says, remember to guard your privacy and abide by community guidelines. Somebody wrote. Can you, Dr. Cave, switch off, please, because we can't hear anything. Like others, we propose that incorporate some of the comments that were made uh, as we move forward. But you'll also learn next time that it's better to attend in person because we lose you. So we are going to have a good time around here. Colleagues, anybody? Before we close, okay, there's one. Okay, guys, and these are going to be short because there is one we start here, there is two short, there is three, and then there is four short, guys, because I'm a very strict person. When I say 1 o'clock we are done, I mean 1 o'clock we are done. No second added. Okay? So in 2 minutes, you say what you want to say. If you can't say it in 2 minutes, don't say it. Yes, sir. The mic, please.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Mashudu. Just a comment. You've collected all the intelligence that you need. But now there's the aspect or issue of political interference. Then what do you do? Just a comment. Thank you.
Okay. Short and sweet. I like that. Short and sweet.
Good evening, good afternoon, guys. Women in a good social standing. In terms of the intelligence in our country or in Africa, the bad way of our leaders is not to respond in time. In terms of the political crisis, instead of being in time or observe where the crisis will occur before, then put the soldiers or the police in that particular areas in time, then they delay. And then they wait things to happen, then they say, we send the intelligence to respond. Well, there is a disaster.
Thank you, thank you. Third?
Thank you. Mine is very simple, directed to you, Mwalimu. If there is an African intelligence here, why then are we facing turmoils?
Thank you, Prof. Again, I just want to demystify the issue of diplomacy and intelligence. I would make an example. From up until 2009, the ambassador to the UN from Britain was John Sowers. Some of us got to know him because of the ins and outs in 2007, when South Africa was chairing the UN Security Council. So you can go back and read about those things. But John Sowers, when he left and joined the MI6, it's a foreign intelligence service in Britain. He was the head, he was appointed the head of MI6 from 2009 to 2014. When he came, they said, welcome back. What is welcome back? So intelligence could be part of the same hand, maybe the back hand, the back side of the hand, and diplomacy would be the front side of the hand. But especially if your concentration of work is outside the country. In terms of effectiveness, efficiency and effectiveness, I would like you guys to go and read the book, The Man Without a Face. It is about Marcus Wolf, who was the head of the counterintelligence in East Germany. He is actually the man who held against the Western countries. But also in terms of efficiency, you must read the Body of Secrets from NSA. If you read, because NSA is the biggest intelligence organizations in the world. Lastly, Prof, without wasting your time.
Our time.
Okay, our time. We tend to underestimate the work and the work that we do as Africans. In actual fact, if you go and read in terms of the work that has been done by CISA and the Peace and Security Council, you will realize that a number of conflicts have been managed in Africa. And I would like you to compare the work that has been done by the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe with regard to the conflict in Ukraine and Russia, and the work that has been done by CISA in Africa. For example, there were clear signs in 2016, 2014, 2016, and 2021 that Russia is going to get.
Thank you very much. With that, I would like to give the last word to Prof. Sfiso Ndlovu, who is the acting director of the Research Hub at the TM School, to close for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll speak here as the acting director of research, not as a historian, because, because I can take you back to the days in pre-colonial times when intelligence officers were called as intloli, they still are. And they've done so much in terms of community policing in those areas. And that any battle that terms of as military intelligence that has to take place, they had to go and do their work. Just like the Anglo-Zulu War, the so-called Battle of Blood River, there is Ubongoza, who did such a good work in the sense that immediately after the battle, he was caught, but he misdirected the Boers, and because they were defeated at the Battle of Italy because of his intelligence. So the Zulus didn't lose power in 1838. They only lost it in 1840. And it was not the Boers or Afrikaners. It was King Bande who defeated King Dingan. But because of the role of the intelligence guys. So that's my 2 cent worth of contribution. So that's why I understand why a professor in Nigeria was calling for indigenous intelligence to be studied through social anthropology. But we know that anthropologists are good, intelligent officers. And we are colonized because of them, because they provided, the reports back home in terms of how to control Africans. That's their job. But thank you, colleagues who contributed. But next time, we are of the opinion that we have to fly you in because we lost so much, in terms of knowledge production. And we now understand because this is an intelligence colloquium, people are going to interfere with us, not to hear what are your concluding thoughts. And I would also like to thank everybody here for really wasting your time in this cold world and take us serious as a school. But we hope that as we now legit, that you will enroll and do intelligence studies with that. And you heard the main man, the professor, is so passionate about it. So welcome to the school. And also I would like to thank the staff also for supporting the professor here. And we hope to see you soon because we are going to have another event. I think it's around the early week of September. It's about gender feminism, and it will be a PDF seminar. Thank you. I think there's something outside there for you. Ukubamba ithumbu. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Nothing more to say. Thank you.